Hi guys, here to discuss chapter 2, which is about analyzing the selection. And just like last time, I've tried to highlight some of the key points that I think bear more discussion or that I might be able to shed light on through my voice that I can't actually do sometimes in printed text, hence why we do oral interpretation. All right, you want to make sure the notes that are in green here, I wanted to draw your attention to terms that you really should know. As an English major, you should know the difference between connotative versus denotative. And as an oral performer, these words are very important because if you see that a word is heavily connotative, it's going to affect the way that you perform that word, what emotion you invest into it, how you hold your posture, what kind of articulation you use or your pitch. So connotative words help us find places to really develop our performance. Should you make eye contact with the audience? Well, here's the thing. Generally, no, you should not. The audience should have the feeling that it is between you, the performer, and the text. So here you are, a performer. You look at the back wall when you deliver your lines. Your eyes generally go over the audience on some specified spot on the back wall. Whether you are being a narrator or a speaker, this creates the effect of the audience witnessing the unfolding of the text. You're not delivering the text to the audience, you're bringing the text alive. That's kind of a big difference. Uh, there's some of the difference between acting and oral performance, although in acting you generally don't look at the audience either. So think of this way that when you are seeing a drama, you have the sense of something unfolding before you. And when you're delivering an oral performance, your eyes should be on the back wall and generally avoid eye contact with the audience. This is very different than a normal speech where you're used to panning the room, as you deliver your lines. And you always want to pull everybody in and you want there to be that personal contact in a speech. In oral interpretation, we don't want that. You're drawing attention to the text, not to you as a speaker. However, there are some occasions when you might choose to do something different with your eye contact. It is very effective to pick a single line and deliver it eye contact to or direct to a single member of the audience. For example, if you're talking along, you're talking about how maybe a character was enduring some very difficult hardship, and there's this very obvious shift in the text, and you want to take one moment and single out one person in the audience and go, and it was at that moment I realized I didn't know if I could go on, or my life was in jeopardy. And then your eyes go right to the back wall. It's like you take this really key line that you really want to emphasize, you deliver it to one person, and then you go right back to the back wall. You probably want to warn somebody before you single them out that way because it can make us nervous or giggle or something like that. But it can be really effective. It's like this momentary breaking of that wall between performer and audience, transcending that fourth wall, as it were. Another way that you might choose to do something different with your eye placement is if you have chosen a poem or if later on in the class you choose a prose piece where you feel like the speaker is talking to him or herself. And when we talk to ourselves, we tend to kind of place our eyes in this, there's like this circle around us. And it's almost like we're looking at kind of the space, a few inches in front of our nose. We're thinking like this, we're talking, Elisa, why do you do this? You don't tend to look at the back wall. Likewise, when you're thinking, if you're really thinking about something, it's very difficult to keep your eyes straight forward. Studies show that when people think that they want to look upward. That's why it's kind of difficult to have somebody during a testing time to have their eyes straight down all the time because when we think we want to look up. So if you're thinking or if you feel like your passage that you're presenting is the speaker or the narrator of the text speaking to him or herself, it's okay to kind of localize your eye contact in like this invisible sphere around the speaker. But it needs to be a purposeful choice and it needs to be maintained consistently in the piece. If you think, gosh, I want to have at some point have my eye placement be in the invisible sphere around the speaker, and at other times on the back wall, making contact with some identified spot, you should run that by, shoot me an email, okay? And let us see if you're making a good choice. But where you're going to lose points in your performance with your eye placement is if it's not purposeful and it's inconsistent. Like you begin with your eyes on the back wall and then you start panning the room and making eye contact with everybody. That's not purposeful. You've probably lost your focus maybe from nerves or just not practicing eye placement, but eye placement needs to be practiced, and it's very powerful when it's done well. There's one other way that your eye placement can differ. So we've got back wall to really create this sense of the audience is privy to something unfolding. Within the invisible sphere around the speaker to communicate that the narrator or the speaker is talking to him or herself. And the last one is if you're kind of talking to like a god or a non entity that's not physically present. Let me say that again, to God, a God, or some other imagined entity who is not present. And in that case, you again kind of have this invisible sphere. Maybe this, you're imagining that that presence is, a few feet in front of you. So in that case, your eyes are not above the heads of the audience. It's kind of like centered in this invisible sphere in front of the audience, okay? Because in that case, your text is speaking to somebody that needs to be close to the performer. Okay, watch some of the sample performances. I posted a YouTube channel with some past performances on. Watch, and you'll be able to identify the occasional performer who's really able to nail eye placement, who's really able to put it on the back wall, and it's highly effective. Okay. So this week you have to do a practice, or I'm sorry, in the third week of the course, you do a practice on paralinguistic cues and on pausing. It's based on the content of chapter 3 and 4, and I ask you to tape that performance and upload it so I can get a look at how you're reading. Of course, you're going to be reading the piece from Macbeth, but you could try occasionally putting your eyes on a specified place, back wall, or within the invisible sphere, and just see how it feels. Okay. All right. How can you allow the reader to relax from time to time? This is important because a lot of times you pick really intense pieces, and your reader can only be attuned to that intensity for so long. If you begin very sorrowfully or very darkly, you've got to find a moment of lift in your piece, even if it's very minor and the whole piece is dark. But if you hit it with that deep sorrow and you never give us any relief, your audience is going to lose interest. Likewise, if you begin a piece and it's very fiery and fast paced, you've got to find a moment to slow down and give your audience a chance to experience that variety. Variety gives us a place to pause, gives us re-engages our brain. So variety, I can't stress enough, is key. And again, when you watch some of the samples, you will see people that you can see they have purposely sped up a line just to have the one after it slow down and emphasize something. So the idea of purposeful increases in pace, increases in pitch, the occasional really somber whisper. A whisper can communicate gravity or happiness. A whisper can communicate a lot of different things. So this variety gives a place for the audience to rest. Think there has to be somewhere for your performance to go. So if you begin very low, very dark, you've got to get higher and brighter. If you begin very intense, you've got to have a moment of relaxation. There's got to be a place to go. What should you be mindful of when choosing an excerpt? Now, again, an excerpt is different than a cut. An excerpt is a complete piece that you slice out of the middle of a text. Like if you have a really long poem and you only want to do a section of it, that's fine. But an excerpt ideally will still have this Aristotelian sense of beginning, middle, and end. So you want it to have beginning, middle, and end. There's something that within the excerpt you have chosen, there's something that we're working toward understanding so that there's a payoff at the end of it. A cut, on the other hand, is if you have a longer work and you're going to cut out pieces from various places in the text, perhaps to demonstrate the unification of a single theme or to demonstrate some kind of character development. So a cut allows you to go from place to place in a text and to omit parts in between, where an excerpt is a continuous piece that you have taken out of some place in the text, beginning, middle, or end. Okay, but an excerpt has to have this sense of beginning, middle, and end. All right, there's a lot of good information about introductions. In my edition, I'm working from an older one. I have a new one on order, but I've heard they're on back order, but the content's basically the same. There's some good information about how to write an introduction on 57 and 58, and you really want to look at that. Your goal in an introduction is to introduce the text, introduce you as a performer, but you really want to stage how we are going to enter this text, probably emotionally. What are we supposed to feel, envision before we get into the text? You want to prepare us to enter into this place with you, okay? And You can use a teaser from the text itself, a quote, or it can be a quote that's related. For example, somebody did a piece, a poem about childhood hunger, and to begin their introduction, they quoted a current statistic about children who don't have enough to eat. So, kind of to prepare us for the gravity of the poem emotionally. One other note, if your poem or any text you do throughout this semester has objectionable language in it, which sometimes we need to communicate some of the themes we're going to be discussing, just a warning in your introduction. This piece contains some difficult language, which I felt was necessary to convey the gravity of the topic, something like that. Okay. Finally, when you do your introduction, and we will work on this some more, but I know you're probably wanting to think about your first performance, you should deliver your introduction, pause, and then step right into the performance. So there should be this line between the introduction as you, the student, pause, and then you are the text. Okay, you should see that in some of the samples as well. All right, I think that's all for chapter 2. See you in chapter 3.